Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the Sandy Hook defamation trial.
I mean, it just is the fakest thing since a $3 bill.
Jurors are shown videos of Alex Jones mocking the parents of victims and the Doomsday Cult duo.
This case is tough enough without the sensationalization that is the potential of the media.
Attorneys argue over the presence of the media in future court proceedings. Could cameras be banned? Plus, after being acquitted in her teen daughter's murder, Rebekah Rude is sentenced for the one charge she was convicted of. And later,
can you tell us what condition you found him in?
He had blood all over his eyes.
jurors hear from family members of the victims in the Pike County Massacre trial of George Wagner IV. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmeyer. The prosecution grills an Alex Jones representative who admits an article posted to the InfoWars website had inaccurate information about the Sandy Hook shooting. This comes as part of Alex Jones's defamation trial out of Connecticut, where 15 plaintiffs filed lawsuits against him after he claimed that the school shooting was a hoax put on by crisis actors to push gun control. The plaintiffs, made up of the family members of 8 of the students killed and an FBI agent, say Jones's followers have harassed them and even made death threats. Jones has already been found liable for damages in this case, meaning jurors will now decide how much Jones should pay. He was already ordered to pay $49.3 million in a separate defamation case out of Texas. On Thursday, jurors were shown multiple videos of Jones's InfoWars program in which he mocked the parents of Sandy Hook victims. Later, a free speech systems representative admitted an InfoWars article published inaccurate information.
You got parents laughing, going, ha, 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 watch this, and then going, method acting, going, I mean, it's just ridiculous. You got coroners that start laughing, and I don't mean uncomfortably. I mean like laughing with the state police when they're giving press conferences. I mean, it just is the fakest thing since a $3 bill.
This article reporting that the FBI said no one had been killed at Sandy Hook, according to its statistics, was false. Yes?
Correct. It's not right. That's right.
Not right meaning not true, correct?
Right. FBI never said that.
But what Don Salazar was saying to his audience was that there were these statistics that the FBI put out. And that according to Don Salazar, those statistics said that nobody had been killed at Sandy Hook, correct?
That's what the article says, yes.
And in fact, the and the FBI does report crime statistics every year, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the FBI statistics that Don Salazar was referencing did report the murders at Sandy Hook, correct?
I believe they did.
Joining us today is former SWAT and Chicago area detective Lisa Lockwood and co-host Terry Austin. Lisa, there have been fireworks in this case since openings. Has there been one that you think, hey, this is going to bury Jones?
When I say this now, saying one thing particular, it's a compilation of the same thing, and that's just re-traumatizing the family, doxing family members, posting photographs of a child who was deceased and killed that day and saying it was an actor, having his team on the ground, live streaming and harassing victims online. So I would have to say re-traumatizing these victims over and over again is probably what is going to seal it for him.
Yeah, especially the manner in which he did it, as you described, the recording and sending people on the ground. Terry, between their witnesses and how they are running this case, do you see a strategy being used here by Jones's attorneys, or is this just chaos?
Well, you know what? Actually, Brian, it is chaos, but I do see a twofold strategy. First of all, I think that Norm Mattis is throwing out multiple theories. He's literally trying to confuse that jury. So, for instance, he said that the families are exaggerating the harm because they're doing it for political reasons. So I definitely think he is trying to put other thoughts in the minds of that jury. But secondly, I think that they are trying to make a record for an appeal. So, for instance, the judge, as we all know, already has a default judgment on the record, and this is the penalty phase. But on Tuesday, that judge basically said because they failed to turn over analytical data for that website, that now they cannot introduce evidence regarding the fact that they didn't profit from the Sandy Hook remarks. That's going to kill them. These are harsh sanctions. I think they are deserved, but they could be grounds for appeal.
So it's kind of chaotically organized, is what I used to tell my mom my room was like when I was a kid. So they've got some kind of organization. Makes sense. Well, switching now to California, where federal prosecutors now recommend an 8-month prison sentence for the woman who admittedly staged her own abduction in 2016. Back in April, Sherry Papini pled guilty to 2 counts of mail fraud and lying to an officer. The charges stem from a November 2016 incident when Papini allegedly went missing. 22 days later, she was found on an interstate about 150 miles south of where she was reported missing. Papini claimed 2 Hispanic women in a dark SUV abducted and tortured her. But her ex-boyfriend told investigators Papini actually stayed with him during the time she was missing, and that she inflicted injuries, including branding, to herself. Papini was married with 2 children at the time. According to court documents, Papini will pay more than $300,000 in restitution to the agencies involved in the search for her. Still ahead of Law&Crime Daily, a sentence is handed down for the woman convicted of abandoning her daughter's corpse. But first, the Doomsday Cult duo, Lori Vallow Daybell, fights to ban the media from the courtroom of her coming trial. Welcome back. Half of the so-called Doomsday Cult duo appears back in court over motions attempting to ban cameras from future proceedings. Chad Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow Daybell, face charges in the deaths of Lori's 2 children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as Daybell's first wife, Tammy. The pair were dubbed the Doomsday Duo for their shared belief in the end of days. The couple was married in 2019, just weeks after Daybell's first wife mysteriously died in her sleep, and Vallow Daybell's youngest children went missing. In June of 2020, the remains of JJ and Tylee were recovered on Chad Daybell's property. At an appearance on Thursday, attorneys for both sides argued a motion to ban cameras from future hearings and the coming trial in January. Attorneys for Vallow Daybell said in previous hearings, camera operators zoomed in on their client an unnecessary amount.
What's the point to mock her, to make fun of her, to humiliate her? Does it have any value to the public other than to prejudice potential jurors against her? No, no value at all. So does it help the court find a fair and impartial jury in Boise when they zoom in on my client's every facial expression? No, it doesn't.
The media has a right to be there. They don't have a right to broadcast it or have cameras, and the state believes there's a stark difference between watching a live or video of a proceeding as opposed to reading a report on it in a newspaper.
Judge Stephen Boyce also heard from an attorney representing 33 media agencies from across the country that opposed the ban. Judge Boyce did not make a ruling on the motion, but will later issue a written decision. Terry, the prosecution and defense agreed that cameras should be banned from the courtroom. We want to see the trial live streamed. Of course, we're Law&Crime Daily, but what she was arguing, was that persuasive?
You know, I definitely don't think that the arguments to ban the cameras are persuasive at all. I think they should fail. So they're trying to say that the media abused this privilege and they took photographs and videos that were up and close to Lori Vallow, and that technically the conversations might be heard between Lori and her attorneys and written notes might be photographed. And basically, I think those arguments should fail. And I definitely don't agree with what the prosecution is saying. They're saying that it's the same as reading it later. No, it's not. I think that it is definitely in the public's favor to see what's going on. This is a case that's already been sensationalized. It's something that I think the public wants to make sure justice is served and everyone knows about it and everyone wants to see exactly what happened.
I mean, speaking of everyone knowing about it, Lisa, Netflix recently came out with a documentary, Sins of Our Mother, documenting Lori Vallow's life. Now, documentaries have exonerated and convicted criminal defendants. What do you think this series will do here?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I actually watched it last night, and it is So powerful in regards to Lori Vallow's son, Lori Vallow's mother, all of them implicating Lori in doing all of this. So I think because this trial's in 2023, probably during the voir dire process, they will ask people if they had seen the documentary and then try to eliminate those people. But the high profile case of Robert Durst, All Good Things and The Jinx, those two movies, we know the outcome of that, and he was found guilty.
All right, thank you for not spoiling the documentary on Netflix so people can still go and check it out. But of course, come back to Law and Crime to check out Idaho versus Chad and Lori Vallow Daybell. In Maryland, a victory for the man at the center of the famed Serial podcast as prosecutors file a motion to vacate Adnan Syed's conviction and call for a new trial. Syed's case rose to fame in 2014 when the podcast Serial broke listening records. The investigative series cast doubt on Syed's 2000 conviction for the murder of his high school girlfriend, 18-year-old Hae-Ming Lee. Since his arrest, Syed has maintained his innocence. He has been behind bars since 1999 arrests. If the motion is granted, prosecutors say they will request that Syed be released on his own recognizance or have bail set. Syed would also be put into a new trial status and his convictions would be vacated. The state could then dismiss the charges or bring a new case against Syed depending on what an investigation finds. Back in March, Law and Crime Daily reported that DNA testing was ordered on the victim's clothing as part of the state's attorney's investigation. The results of the tests are still pending. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, 2 witnesses allow audio and video recordings of their testimony as George Wagner IV stands trial for murder. Plus, after being acquitted for her daughter's murder, a Missouri woman is sentenced for the abandonment of her corpse. Welcome back. A Missouri woman acquitted of murdering her 16-year-old daughter stands before a judge to learn her sentence for the sole charge she is convicted of. Rebekah Rude was initially charged with killing her daughter, Savannah Leckie, who had autism, and burning her body in her yard. This after Rude gave up her daughter for adoption when she was a baby. But the two came back together later when Leckie exhibited some behavioral problems as a teenager while in the care of her adoptive parents. Rude's defense argued her daughter committed suicide and that she panicked when she found her daughter dead. Following just a few days of testimony, the case was handed over to the judge to decide the verdict, since Rude opted for a bench trial without a jury. Weeks later, the judge handed down a not guilty verdict for all but one count, abandonment of a corpse, a felony punishable by up to 4 years behind bars. On Thursday, Rude was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but she was given credit for her nearly 1,800 days already served. She was also ordered to pay a $5,000 fine. Rude was transferred back to jail where she will be released shortly. Rude's co-defendant and husband, Robert Pete Jr., also appeared in court Thursday for his involvement in the 16-year-old's death, but the judge dropped all charges against him. Pete was also arrested and charged with first-degree murder, child abuse, felony murder, tampering with evidence, and abandonment of a corpse. He's been out on bond for the last 4 years and testified against Rude at her trial. His case was delayed until November for the court to find a replacement for Judge Calvin Holden, who had presided over Rude's trial and retired at the end of it. Terry, I know it's a lot of math, a 4-year sentence, 1,800 days, but do you think the punishment fit the crime for Rude, considering this split decision by the judge?
Well, actually, it serves, I think in my mind, no punishment, because she is going to be able to walk free. 1,800 days basically is 4 years. And so I don't think that this is justice. I cannot get over the fact that this judge only found her guilty of abandonment of a corpse. And in fact, all of the other, crimes that she was charged with, and her husband, and he dropped the charges against the husband, those crimes, there was plenty of evidence for those crimes, for murder in the first degree, abuse of a child, murder in the second degree, tampering with evidence. I don't think he watched the same trial I watched. So I'm in shock, and I don't think it's enough time, and I don't think it was the right judgment.
Yeah. Lisa, at a hearing on Thursday, all charges against Pete were dropped. Do you think that was the right call?
Well, here's the thing. If there was not enough evidence there to convince a judge at a bench trial, then the state didn't do their job. And that's what it comes down to. So they didn't have a jury. They didn't have to deal with the emotions of that. You would hope the judge is completely unbiased, because that's what a judge is supposed to be. You know, in the long run, they need to do better and learn a lesson from this, because we don't know factually how she died, if she was killed, if it was suicide, and there just wasn't enough evidence to convince this judge.
Yeah, the defense in this situation is probably the smartest person in the room, because he decided bench trial over a jury trial. We don't know if it was gone the same way, as Lisa kind of pointed out, if it was gone the same way with the jury. So the defense made the right choice, it seems. Well, we'll continue as the case develops. When we come back, the Pike County Massacre. 2 witnesses opt to be shown on video as the prosecution's case continues against George Wagner IV. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. A family member of the victims gives emotional testimony in the Pike County Massacre trial of George Wagner IV in Ohio. Wagner, along with his brother Jake and their parents, are charged with murdering 8 members of the Roden and Gilly families in April of 2016. Prosecutors say the shooting deaths came amid a custody dispute involving a young child Jake shared with Hannah Roden. The victims were found shot to death in their homes in 4 different locations. Most were shot as they slept. Jake previously pled guilty to the murders and will spend the rest of his life in prison. He has agreed to testify against his brother and father. George Wagner says he's not guilty because he didn't actually pull the trigger. Thursday morning, Kenneth Roden's family member took the stand. Kenneth was the 8th victim killed. Donald Stone emotionally recounted finding his cousin dead in his trailer before calling 911.
So you walked into the residence together, and you said Luke was there first, but then you, and then what happened?
And then we walked in. We walked into supposedly the living room, and I noticed to the right, I didn't see him in there nowhere, so I seen a stairway to the right, and I walked up the stairway, and that's where I found him, up there in his bed.
And when you say you found him, who did you find?
Kenneth Roden's son, Luke, who lived with his mother at the time of the murders, then took the stand. Luke was with Donald when Kenneth's body was discovered. He described an interaction he had with the Wagners before the killings happened.
Did you ever know the Wagners?
Not a lot.
What about Billy Wagner?
Yeah, one time we was out at his property. My dad and Chris loaned him the backhoe for him to do something, and he went out to start the backhoe up, and the backhoe wouldn't start, so he got a hold of my dad and Chris. I was standing there on the trailer, and he was standing beside me, and he said, he looked at me and said, "You see those 2 people?" He said, "They're some really good people." He said, "But if I ever had to with them, that they had to shoot them."
If they ever had to what?
Mess with them. If he had a tussle with them, whatever, that he'd have to shoot them.
Did he explain why that was, or did he say anything more?
No, that was it.
All right, we finally have victims, or witnesses, to discuss, that being the family members of these victims. So, Lisa, what did the prosecution get from Luke that pushed this case to a guilty beyond reasonable doubt?
I think his authenticity when he was on the stand, completely congruent and truthful, especially when he revealed that his own family had a marijuana grow business and they made money from it. There's a defense theory that the cartel is responsible for these murders because of money owed and them wanting to take over the business. Because he was so forthcoming with the business, and he said that yes, people owed them money, but not a lot of money in this particular drug business, showed that that wasn't the issue. Somebody wasn't trying to take over this small business. The most that they had produced at one point was 3 pounds of marijuana, and not enough for a cartel to take out an entire family.
Yeah, I would tend to agree based on what I know little of in terms of criminal law and marijuana. But Terry, did the defense hurt the prosecution's case on cross-examination at all?
Not at all, not in my opinion. I agree 100% with Lisa. Listen, the cross of Donald Stone, remember, that's Kenneth's first cousin, and they were very close. They mentioned that Kenneth was well off, and it was an implication that he was making lots of money from his marijuana business. But I don't think that that is going to hit home with the jury. They understand this was a family dispute. And the cross of Luke, and Luke is Kenneth's son, remember, Luke was a little more in terms of the prosecution going after this marijuana business. He asked a lot of questions. Did you make money? Did you help your father out? And Luke went into it, and I've got to hand it to him. It was cool, calm, and collected. He talked about that marijuana business like it was, selling bread, not a big deal. They mentioned it on direct examination, I think, to take the thunder away from the cross, and they did. It worked perfectly. And essentially, you couldn't really say that people owed Kenneth money, and he made it very clear, Luke made it very clear, that his dad oftentimes lent people money. His dad was a good person. People liked him. And so I think that jury is going to walk away with the cross-examination as not really making any points, saying things that really don't matter. They understand that this was a custody battle. That's why these murders occurred.
All right, let's see how this case continues. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.